Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Quest for the Bestest. It's the podcast from Backlot Banter where we view and review every single Palme d'Or winner. And today we are checking out the 2012 winner, Amour. It is a film about old age, about love, about a couple in the waning years of their life. A rather sad movie, and I'm interested to hear what you guys think about it. But first, we need to remind you of what happened last week because, well, we review a new movie every time, and maybe you miss an episode, maybe you catch it last time. Well, which film did we talk about? Oh, yeah, that's right. We talked about this film with a little Ingmar Bergman, written by. It's called The Best Intentions, about Ingmar Bergman's parents. You can check out the episode to hear our thoughts on this rather long Swedish romance movie. But we thought that it was middling. It got a 7.7 out of 10 on our list, which put it at spot number 8, below the Ballad of Narayama and above A Man and a Woman. Just making sure I didn't read the wrong film there. So check out that review. But today we talk about something a bit more modern, a bit more contemporary. I'm interested to hear what we're going to say about it. But first, Abram, you've got a comment for us to read aloud. Let's have our little ritual.
Speaking of modern and contemporary, this comment comes from 5 hours ago as of the time of recording.
The press is so too hot.
The James Roy 3 commented on our Terms of Endearment review and said, great conversation. I watched Terms of Endearment one afternoon on Cinemax. I was 15 years old. Near the end, my mother walked in the front door. I was crying so hard I buried my face in a pillow. The movie captures a generational contrast, conservative and strong versus freedom and chaos. Unlike today, the adult world was observed, not intermingled. It set the bar for tearjerkers. At times, the vignette style falters, but delivers ambiguity, life's hardest pill to swallow.
Mm-hmm.
A lot in there.
Yeah.
A wistful comment.
A wistful comment. We're sharing childhood memories. We're sharing poetic observations on American film, Best Picture winners, which we have reviewed all of.
Every single one of them. Yeah. Go check out a playlist.
At some point, there's going to be a whole host of Quest viewers that are like, what? I thought they just did the Palme d'Or winner.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
What do you mean there's 90 episodes more of this to watch? Ooh, ah. Well, Amour, directed by Michael Haneke, starring Jean-Louis Trintignant, Emmanuel Riva. Those are our two main characters. They're pretty much the only ones in this film. Tanner, would you do us the pleasure of giving us a little plot synopsis, a little recap of what happens in this movie?
Sacre bleu, I suppose I can, Timo.
Jeez.
We're starting off on a light note because Amour isn't necessarily a light film. This is the story of an elderly couple, Georges and Anne, who live together in their flat in France, maybe Paris. I'm not really sure.
I think Paris.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And during one of their morning breakfasts, Anne has a mild stroke, and this scares George, so he decides to take her to the hospital, where a very unfortunate and unforeseen complication in her surgery winds her up in a wheelchair. Her right side is paralyzed, and she must be sort of doted after day and night by George and various healthcare professionals that come into their home. And this puts a strain on their relationship that's lasted decades and decades, as they must face down sort of the realities of mortality and death and growing apart in those final years and how stressful that can be. Other characters enter the film, namely their daughter, portrayed by Isabelle Huppert, and her name is Ava. Mm-hmm. And she is having her own struggles at the time, and she's having trouble, sort of relating to her parents and juggling her own life struggles at the same time. But for spoilers for Amour, George just eventually, towards the end of the film, decides to put Anne out of her misery, I guess, as her mind is completely gone at this point. She's not really conscious, I guess you would say, or, she's not really there as she once was. So George smothers her, and the end is a bit ambiguous. Is it a dream? Is it real life? I mean, it's not. It is a dream, I should say, but
it's not real life. It's a movie.
Does George die, or does George just sort of leave, and then the end, the very beginning of the film happens where some police inspectors or building owners break down the door to discover Anne's body.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Quite a tragic film, a difficult watch. Who would like to start us off with their thoughts on this film? Maybe Abram?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think this is somewhat of a tricky film to get into because obviously this is a movie all about sort of the pathos, right? It's all about the emotion of our characters and sort of trapping us in this very bleak and reflect a situation that asks you to not only reflect on the life of these characters, but sort of the life of yourself and maybe your family if you have older family members and everything. I think it prompts a lot of reflection. And it also, at a certain point, I found myself just really wishing the movie would be done because I think it so completely soaks you in this very bleak atmosphere that an hour 40 kind of feels like two and a half. And I don't necessarily mean that for the better. I think movies like this are a little bit tricky in that I kind of feel like this is an instant win button. This is old.
The movie is over
couple-
2 hours, by the way. It's not an hour 40.
It's two.
Tanner told me it was an hour 40 for a
I
while.
lied. I lied to him.
It's
That's
2
why I
hours
didn't
and
feel like
7
an hour
minutes.
40.
Yeah.
But either way, I kind of feel like these sorts of stories are the instant win button of this is the fastest lever to pull to make the audience sad. And I kind of feel like if you're able to rip your own heart out and look at the film just intellectually, I feel like there's a dimension missing here for me. I feel like I don't know if I want more from the characters or if I want more of the more surreal and visceral moments of the film that there are here. But I don't know. I feel like the broad strokes and the subject matter are what carry my interest in Amour, and beyond that, I don't really have a whole hell of a lot to add. I don't think I didn't find it super compelling beyond the emotion, and I think this sort of emotional exploitation and reflection is prompted by a number of things, not just this movie.
Sure. I mean, I would say that I disagree with a couple of points you made there. I do find this film to have a level of intellectual stimulation that other films that might tackle similar subject material might not have. This is a film directed by Michael Haneke, who basically at every turn avoids melodrama in his filmography, in his career. You know, he's the director of such horrid and disturbing films as Funny Games, or things that have, you know, a lurid appeal like The Piano Teacher or like Cachet, or things like this, where it is very nihilistic, it is very grounded. We are not sort of flouting about in the heightened emotions of our characters. We are down in the emotional trenches with them, and Amour is very much that. And I don't feel it like it is manipulative. And I know you didn't use that word. I don't know if you feel like this film is manipulative, but it feels the opposite of that to me, where it is like we're not employing any particular storytelling tropes or cinematic flourishes to make you feel this way. We're purely pouring our efforts into displaying the very grounded and stellar performances of our main two characters here, and through that, it's just very raw. Is kind of what I feel about this film. It feels sort of unadulterated from a directorial standpoint. He's just like, we're telling a story. This is what it is. It's not going to be like especially feel good. There's not going to be necessarily feel good moments. There's not going to be like the high before the low. It's just a slow grounding into the dirt before a husband feels that he has to put his wife out of her misery, and then he presumably dies as well.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm kind of conflicted on this film because I see this very emotionally wrought plot, and our characters and the conceit of the film really lends itself to a very watchable film, and a film that is very affecting. But I also find myself thinking about that all on the logic side. And this is a film where I receive all the sadness and I receive all of, I think, what it's trying to tell me logically. But I actually found myself really emotionally disconnected from this film in a way that, you know, a film like I, Daniel Blake, which is equally sad, I would say, really connected to me and was like punching me in the gut. And this one, despite being very sad, despite having very well made film, very, very good filmmaking, very good sound design, very, you know, all these things that, like, you know, I'm trying to be a good intellectual viewer and understand and see. It was like this film is doing everything that it's trying for, and it's succeeding at everything that it's trying for, and somehow that wasn't enough for me. So that note that you said about like avoiding melodrama, Tanner, I think is important because you're right. This film is very unmelodramatic. I think that the things that it chooses to focus in on and to zoom in on are like the realities of this situation. How do we move? How does the husband help the wife get out of bed? How does he make sure that she's eating? I think that the smaller details of this film are some of the ones that really tug at my heartstrings the most. But I wanted the overarching things to tug at my feelings. And so those moments were very effective, but it just didn't leave me. It was like I wanted to be emotionally destroyed by this movie, and by the end of it I like wasn't. I was just feeling kind of neutral, just feeling kind of like I just watched a film that was good, but it didn't like punch me in the gut. Maybe has to do with I really haven't dealt with old age like that. I really haven't, in my own life. I'm kind of, this is an area that I have yet to experience. Yeah, I really haven't been around anyone who's gone through something like this. So I feel like if you know it more personally, it might hit you really, really, really hard.
Yeah, I like this movie quite a bit, and I think that what I want to draw in on in terms of where I think we can kind of collect all of our both, I think, the praise and criticism of this movie kind of exist in one place, which is something that Abram mentioned earlier, in that there is no, or it was Abram or Tanner, I don't know, you guys are basically the same in my mind.
Get it mixed up.
There's no highs before the lows, and this movie operates at its buzz. It's not, or its hum. It's not a low hum. It's not a high hum. It operates at the hum that is required to tell a very, very, very simple story, and one that is entirely based around the emotional reality and the challenges that come from losing a sense of self and from losing a relationship and watching that devolve slowly over time. And I think that it is operating at on the exact wavelength and the exact scenes and the exact sequences that this story needs to be told. But I also do fall into a camp that this is not one of my favorite movies, even though I think it is very, very good. That I almost wish it was more manipulative, that it was more melodramatic, because this is such a focused movie that, Timo, you were mentioning that the movie is strongest in its small moments, in the very, very small minutia, and rather than larger scale plot. But I think that, to me, it feels like it's all small moments. And then the moments, even though they are affecting in the moment, end up sort of blending together. And I think that that's intentional. But I think that the lack of larger differences across the movie, there's not major, I mean, really the only major plot twist is the ending. And that is like, that's 2 minutes before the film finishes. It is also a decently long movie, especially for as simple of the subject matter as we get. And so I think that as simple as Amour is, I think it would have been more affecting if it had been tightened down to the best of the small moments in an hour 40, as Tanner and Abram thought that it was. I think that you cut 25 minutes out of this movie, I think you leave the other end feeling like you've seen the emotional highlights of this movie. And I think that, but I still also think that the fact that it's not all just the emotional highlights is still a good thing for delivering exactly what this film is going for. And so I come to sort of a crossroads of like, you got to have the slow, boring, just going through your day stuff before you get the things that are a little bit more heartfelt or tough to watch. But then also at a certain point, it becomes all stuff that's tough to watch. And so then I think I became sort of like almost emotionally calloused by the end of the film. When we see him, we see Georges' mother, Anne, I'm like, yeah, like that specific moment didn't leave me like, oh, I can't believe he did that. I had built up this sort of emotional callus over the course of the film. Like, yeah, that makes sense. But also I think that this is one of the most interestingly emotional films that I've seen, because I was like sick to my stomach with emotion during a lot of this movie. Like, oh man, there's no upside to this, and it's no one's fault, and there's nothing you can really do.
It's not going to get better.
Yeah. And it's going downhill, which I think compounds all of that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of intentionality to everything in this film, and I want to clarify that on a statement I made earlier that like you don't feel Michael Haneke in the film being like crafting highs and lows or anything like that, but there is undoubtedly a lot of intentionality in how this film presents the long stationary camera sequences of just like trying to get her out of bed, or just doing these very mundane tasks, or moving her from one end of the hallway to the other. It's very intentional in the way that that's presented. Is like these minuscule tasks have now become like compounded upon these people being 80 plus years old and moving at a slower pace. She can now only move half of her body, and he has to be there at her side the whole time to help her out with all these things. And with that, I feel like this film also has this like sort of shadowed ticking clock that like they are elderly and so don't have much time left together, and now there is a further speeding up of that clock that like she is deteriorating quickly. And so it feels even more painful when you have to drag out the mundane actions of everyday life like that. It's like these are some of their final moments together, and they're spent, trying to get to a wheelchair or trying to get to the living room or whatever. I think there's a lot of intentionality there. I mentioned the incredible performances, and I do want to talk about them because I think they are some of the most like grounded and raw sort of performances, and very, very impressive from that standpoint. I just wanted to point out the clear intention with a lot of how this film presents.
Yeah,
Totally.
I was thinking. Well, Abram, you want to go or go? I was going to talk about the title, about the amour and the love,
sure.
and how that this film. It seems to me that one of the more interesting areas that it's interested in is the love, and how their love for each other mutates really as a result of these illnesses, and how we can see them go from a place of having this is a very strong couple. They know each other very well, and they seem to have a lot of love for each other. And it's in that very interesting later in life love, in which they've clearly been together for so long that their patterns and their habits are just very normal for them. And so when things change as a result of the first stroke and then the second stroke, you see the tension between the two of them, and a helplessness in George that is very tough to watch, because he's trying so hard to be selfless and supportive and to do everything, and Anne is not completely. She doesn't want all this help, and she at the start she wants to be independent, and she is trying to still be like in the olden days, but that's just not possible. And then as the film progresses more and more and more, I'm remembering a scene in which George is trying to get her to eat and to drink, and she will not accept the food and will not accept the water. And that is it's a very interesting scene, because of the way that Anne is so unwilling to like accept the situation that's going on, or she has accepted it so fully that she needs to like end the situation, that she doesn't want to continue. I mean, she mentions that once or twice. And so the love that these characters show for each other is a very, I think it's not a love that we ever really get to see on the screen. This is not the type of love that makes your heart pound and you swoon. It's a very realistic and a very challenging kind of romance that this film is interested in. And so I'm this is a praise note, because we don't ever see this kind of stuff in most other films.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think you're totally right, Timo, and for me, I boil it down as simply as, if he didn't love her so much, then none of this would have happened. He wouldn't have felt this sort of duty to honor the promise to not put her back in a hospital or put her into a care home or whatever. And so I think a lot of that love that you're explaining is not only in the actions, but it's also in what's unspoken or mentioned and sort of carries throughout the film. I think the bond between them is really the only thing that glues the narrative together. And I think, that introduces an interesting complication when the daughter will arrive and get angry at George for not putting on into a home or anything, and in some ways accusing him of not loving her enough, which he has to continually rebuke. And there is this element of pragmatism that underscores a lot of the actions in the film and a lot of the pacing of the film. I agree that it's very, very real. And I think, the issue with that as a viewer, for me at least, with that is it becomes so real that the point's made, and then I want something else. And I think that's maybe what I was trying to get at the beginning. It's not that the film, I think the film is very well crafted in how it illustrates the reality that once you're on that slope, there's no coming up the other side. And we even got a really interesting moment from George where he's explaining to the daughter, like, she asks what's going to happen next. And he says, we're going to keep going, and every day we're going to do these things, and your mom's going to get worse, and she's going to get worse, and one day it's all going to be done.
Yep.
And, Tucker, you're making the point about emotional callous, but I almost, for me as a viewer, there's more of like a relief when he kills her.
Yeah.
Okay, we can have that moment of finality. But I think ultimately the reason that I have a hard time with this film is because, and this is not a commentary on the filmmaking, but I think it's inescapable, the fact that when you make a film this real about something that is this intrinsically painful, with no real cinematic flourish or no sort of script there to save the audience, it becomes very taxing to watch. And I think that's where I think it just grinds to the bone, to the point for me of like, man, I'm wanting more out of the characters, or I'm wanting more out of the larger context to have something that gets us away from this topic. And I appreciate how deftly Haneke tackles this, but I just don't think it changes the fact that for me as a viewer, I'm like, this is a real thing, and I don't necessarily need this movie to just show it to me.
Totally.
All the film does is show me this, and I think that's very technically effective. But as a viewer, that's why, to me, it's not manipulative. You're right, but it's so understandable, and it's so real in its depiction that I feel like, similar to how I felt about like Spotlight for longtime Quest viewers. The subject matter itself is what's intrinsically motivating here. It's the filmmaking doesn't take me nearly as far as the topic does.
Yeah, well,
I think that's a good point, because I am someone who very much looks for, in the films that I connect most to, a sense of cinematic realism in terms of heightened magical realism, doing crazy things with shot composition that feel surreal but ground me deeper into the world of filmmaking. And so I'm totally fine when a film and filmmaking makes itself known, when there's a weird moment of Foley, when there's a strange editing choice, when there's a strange framing, or a very ridiculous plot element. These are the things that I enjoy, because I think they allow me to place myself into heightened reality and then ground myself down, like it kind of balances out with realistic human emotions. And so the reason why a lot of realist movements, whether that's Italian neorealism or there's a lot of French cinema that's really just about people going about their day-to-day lives, I find those to be less emotionally affecting and intellectually stimulating, because they lack the element that I look for most in cinema. And it's because I want to see things that I could not see otherwise. Now, there's a chance that I will be in a situation at some point in my life where either someone I know or myself are in a situation with a stroke, being paralyzed, having a disability thrust upon them through an accident of surgery. This is something I absolutely could experience in my life, and obviously I hope that I don't, but it's something that just is a fact of realism that it happens to people. But it is so, as Timo, as you were saying, it is so different from what I experience in my day-to-day life, that I think that this is one of the movies that, even if it is just about a realistic scenario with realistic people they're just in their flat and they're trying to go about their life, I still found myself connecting to it more than I would films about people just going to work and engaging in a more average romance in terms of scripts that we usually see. This ended up feeling slightly more heightened for me because this is a hard scenario. This is a not ridiculously uncommon scenario, but it is an uncommon scenario to see portrayed on film. And so I think the movie strikes a interesting balance in that it is not one of my favorites because it's just about people. And I like Shape of Water and Everything Ever All at Once and Poor Things and Avengers. Like I like movies that go crazy with things, and this movie does not. But in the fact that it is about such a scenario that is so different from my own personal life, I almost felt that it was like reaching towards something that was like so unique that I was drawn to it, even in a quote unquote average scenario, normal thing that happens to normal people.
Mm-hmm. Well,
yeah, I mean, without getting into like, you know, the different types of storytelling and how we connect to them, like they're obviously, you know, and I'm not saying anyone's disagreeing with this, but there's merit to making stories like this that are grounded, that are realistic, that show you the facts of life, and you know, sort of prod you emotionally and intellectually into thinking about these things and thinking about people in these with lives like these. And you know, sort of helping it to illuminate things about you, or think about things in your life, or you know how you might react in such a scenario.
Mm-hmm.
And what's important there is, and it's something Timo had touched on, and you've all sort of mentioned with how you respond to certain elements of the film, is the title, as getting back to what Timo said, of love, and how love is something that can be taken for granted in a lot of films as like, oh, these characters are in love, so they do this or whatever. But love is it's a psychological function that makes people act in different ways, and maybe act against somebody else's best interest or their own best interest. And is that truly love? I believe that topic came up on a recent Quest episode. Like, did X character truly love what? Sorry.
Yeah, Best Intentions. That was last week.
Yes, thank you. Yes, sorry, thank you. Yeah, I was like, is it Best Intentions? Yeah. Does X character truly love Y character because he did Z? And from that standpoint, I think that Amour is, and Michael Haneke is positing here, is something very akin to that question. Is like, can you love some, like, one of Anne's final conversations with Georges was, I don't want to live like this. I would like to die before I continue to deteriorate, before I lose myself, before I'm trapped away in my brain that is like eating itself essentially, or you know, my brain that is failing.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to die before that happens. And Georges, you know, if you love someone like that, you're not going to be like, well, yes, I agree, you should die. But also, like, you're betraying that person that you know, and she is becoming someone that you do not recognize. But is it selfish to keep her around simply because you once loved the person that she was, that she no longer is, and she merely resembles that person? And then it brings into question, I think Abram had mentioned, when Ava comes into the narrative, when their daughter shows up and says, like, you don't love her because you're not sending her off to a facility where they can better take care of her. Yeah. So Georges is in this weird, like, trifecta, a meeting of roads where, like, Anne says that if he truly loves her, he would let her die. Ava says that if he truly loves her, then he would send her off somewhere else. And Georges is just like, I just have to do what I want to, what I feel my love is compelling me to do, which is keep her here, tend to her in her final moments, and when she dies, then that's it. But I'm not going to take any action before that. And it's not until the end of the film when he shares a childhood story about, you know, being in a faraway place, like a summer camp or something like that, is what he mentions, and getting sick and not being able to see his mother because he's in quarantine with diphtheria, that he recognizes that, I wrote it down here, my exact thoughts, so just give me a moment, that being alone in his suffering, and he's telling that story, and he's coming to that realization, and he's remembering how he felt as a child, not being able to, like, looking through a window at his mother, much like Anne might be looking through a metaphorical window at him and not being able to reach her, before he's like, I understand that this kind of loneliness is the true suffering, and decides to kill her. And it's a movement that comes very quickly. It's jarring. It jarred me. Oh, is there an issue here?
Yes.
You froze for like 15 seconds.
Okay.
You're back though.
Oops.
It's
Okay. Okay. It's
We-
a very jarring moment that did frighten me. So I think the end of that film is all very compelling, and as I mentioned, gets into this idea of what Michael Haneke is saying about how our brains can interpret love and love for other people differently.
I also think that the moment of Anne's death at the end and George's decision to kill her or to not or to hold off on it for a while, because it seems that Anne doesn't want to be living. She makes this clear kind of in the middle of the film, it feels like, and that second half of the movie is George living with the person that he doesn't really know. And to me, I was thinking in those moments right before he kills her, I was like, I don't see how he can live very long without her being around. Knowing how long-term relationships build up like this, and just imagining that, when she's not there, and then that when his kind of purpose in life at this point is to take care of her, and when that's no longer there, what's left for George? What is there in this world? And so to me, I was reading that as he is selfishly out of the desire to keep their relationship to be together, keeping her alive, because otherwise without her he is not much. He there's not much in the world for him.
Well, I think it's actually interesting how, and I think this is really the crux of the film, Timo, is the way that this situation of illness, paralysis, surgery, strokes, all of the things that compound to put Anne in the disabled situation that she's in, end up becoming the overwhelming focus of every moment of their day-to-day life. And I think this movie is at its best tension, for me at least, when there are the moments of trying to regain some sense of normalcy, whether that is Anne trying to, in the first half of the film, maintain her as much bodily autonomy as she can, as much independence, as much intelligence as she can, and then watching that slip away and become less and less frequent as a part of their life, to the point where second half of the movie, George never goes shopping. He never leaves the apartment. He never, he barely reads. He doesn't listen to music. He doesn't have any hobbies or interactions with other people. He barely leaves the room. His life has become, or the purpose of his day-to-day, every waking moment, has become to make sure that he is doing everything that he can for the situation with Anne. And especially as she loses her ability to express her frustration, and her mental capacity diminishes to the point where she is just doing like rote mechanical actions and saying words that necessarily mean anything, and her cognitive function has just completely disappeared. I think that's really the tension of this movie, is watching, especially, I think a lot of my favorite scenes are in the first half of the film. The ones that I found the most emotionally affecting were when Anne was trying to maintain her autonomy, when she's trying to open a book, but she only has one hand, or put on her glasses for the first time, and I think that some of the best moments of character interaction, in terms of where the emotions come out, is when she feels guilty to continue to ask him to do things for her, even though she has no way of doing any of these things herself. And so then she feels like a burden, and she tries and tries and tries to do things for herself. But because of the fact that she's lost the use of 3 of her limbs, and her mental faculties are decreasing, she fails. And you can see that frustration in her eyes as she tries to get out of bed and falls and breaks the lamp, and tries to open the book, and tries to eat by herself, and then she can't. I think that the tension between the attempt to regain normalcy, and at the beginning, kind of the hope that things might get better. Okay, we're gonna work out your legs. We're gonna make sure you're eating right. We're gonna make sure that you're taking the medicine, because there's a chance that it might, where you might recover, that we might be able to regain some sense of normalcy. It's the scratching and continuing to fail at regaining normalcy, and then watching that be lost over the course of the film, that I think is really the emotional core of this film. And when I think we get the best moments of performance out of both of our actors and when we get the best thematic moments of the film.
I think that something that is, you were kind of thinking about normalcy, routine. This film uses some pretty cool methods, I believe, to really show us what's normal, and it's all through the music. Our characters are retired music teachers, and they have a student, Alexander, who performs as a virtuosic performer. And the film in the very beginning starts with them at his concert, and as we end up seeing, that's the last time they ever go out. That's the last time they ever have a normal evening of their previous life together. And I think the film uses the music. Tugger and I watched it together, and we noted that you said that, like, there's not non-diegetic music in this film.
Yeah.
The music all comes from within the scenes. And to me, it's a big cue for when characters, particularly George, are reaching back and trying to remember, trying to recall that period of normalcy. And I think that a couple of moments of rather well done filmmaking here, in which we break from the complete realism, which we break and we show Anne playing the piano. And there's like, I think there's, I don't remember exactly where it is, but George is sitting there, and in real life, he's listening to the CD recording of the piano. But the film shows us him imagining Anne playing the piano. And those moments, I think, are very, very strong to just remind us, where did we come
They're
from?
also some of the most cinematically interesting. Because there's actually something being done with cinematography and editing that is largely absent in the rest of the film.
Yeah, you get a little bit of a realism in those moments, and so your brain is kind of like, oh wait, what? Oh yes, this is I'm watching a movie, not just a recording of the apartment. Yeah, so I think the music in this film has the music in this film
I was hoping someone would hop on that one.
Has a lot of meaning, and is actually quite beautiful too.
Yeah, sure. Speaking of moments where we step out of the raw realism that is presented in the rest of the film, I wanted to get you guys' thoughts on, I think we should talk about one scene in particular that really sticks out, which is George's dream sequence that happens like halfway through the film, when he is wandering through these desolate halls of the chateau. I guess I called it a flat in the introduction. It'd be more of a chateau, wouldn't it? A plateau. And there's like water up to his ankles, and then a disembodied hand comes out from behind his head, covers his mouth. He sort of is shocked and surprised, lets out like a muffled yell, and then wakes up. Just a really interesting scene to drop in the middle of this film here from Haneke. So I want to get your thoughts there.
It's a dreamy dream sequence. It's
yeah.
It's surreal. It's hard to figure out what it means, which is, if you're going to do a dream sequence in a realistic movie, I feel like that's actually a much more apt way of shooting it and conceiving it. So I don't know what it means. It's a dream. It's anxiety manifest in his sleep. I mean, it's cool, but I don't actually have an interpretation of it. And I'm okay with that, because it's a dream. You're not supposed to know. It's just it's freaky. It's weird because it comes right at you, and you don't necessarily know it's a dream. It's
exactly.
But if you look real closely, look at the sets, and there's like a lot of dust, and then things are a little different than what we see, because this apartment, the location that we spend the entirety of the movie in, is very, I would say, meticulously photographed. We see pretty much every corner of the whole building, of every room, and so in that dream sequence, I'm immediately like, wait a second, this is not the geography that has been established. And so
the hallway's too wide, the paint on the walls is different.
It's way dustier, it's way dirtier than we saw it earlier. So yeah.
No, I get that. I wasn't expecting you guys to like armchair psychologist. What does this dream mean? But no, I just wanted to get you guys' like thoughts on it, because it does come at a very a very surprising time in the movie, and there's not really anything like it unless you count the very end of the film, which again, that is like presented as though it's happening in reality, whereas this is definitely surreal, like Timo said.
I really found the dream sequence quite interesting because I took it in some way as like George's fear of what's happening to Anne happening to him, as he sort of becomes. If you really look at what's happening in that dream, a place that he once knew has become unrecognizable. He's lost the ability to speak. He set on like a sensory level. He's encountering things that are wrong and inexplicable. He's an interesting character because we get these sort of signifiers of great wealth from him. He pulls 800 euro.
Yes, just out of his wallet.
Out of his wallet at one
He's
point.
like, keep the 20.
Yeah, he's clearly a man. They live in a very nice wing of the chateau, as you're saying. I mean, there's clear signifiers that he's a man of some sort of wealth and significance, but we're almost entirely closed off from him, and I think that's obviously intentional to illustrate the ways that these sort of end-of-life care responsibilities become all-consuming. And so I think that's just a rare moment we get to spend in his head, and I think it in some ways sort of illustrates the hostility of the situation where he has no space for himself except for his like pseudo-conscious moments, where even those are very like full of peril and fear.
They're a nightmare.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that the film also is, it's not like super subtle, but it is hinting that as a result of old age, George is having memory problems that he mentions memory many times. He's like, oh, I don't know where I put that. Or, and it's never a point of conflict like Anne's illness is, but it is something that I really noticed and felt like a bit of background. And I was waiting for the other shoe to drop the whole movie.
Well, totally.
I was
and
waiting,
that's actually, I think,
which I think is a really good tension builder that it never pays off is also just like, that's just how life is. That's how illness is. And or like memory loss and Alzheimer's is that, it could go at any moment and it could become very, very difficult for the two of them to deal with the situation. And so that was also playing into that dream sequence there was that, he might be losing it a little bit and not necessarily communicating that to us and to Anne that, because that's a very common thing that when people lose their memory, they're really ashamed of it and they really hide it. They really try to hide it very strongly. And so and that causes lots of problems. It's not good for when that happens.
Yeah. I think that the tension of not knowing when something bad is going to happen is one of the other great strengths of this film, and part of the reason why I felt myself engaged with it throughout is especially when the characters were separated. I always felt that we were more than likely going to hear a scream from the other room, hear something crash, enter back in the other room and find the other character, mostly Anna, or Anne rather. Sorry, I have your girlfriend on the mind, Tanner.
When that came out was last week. I was last week with the best intentions too.
But that something bad was going to happen. Obviously, something bad did happen many, many times in this film. But even in the scenarios when something didn't happen, anytime we were in the kitchen in the other room, brushing teeth, going about the normal stuff, I'm like, uh-oh, this is not going to go well. And sometimes it went fine, and sometimes it went poorly. But I think that the fact that, and Tio and I were actually discussing this last night, the fact that there is no cause for any of this. There's no person to point the finger to. There's no blame. There's no intention to any of the bad things that are happening. They just happen out of nowhere because of the way that old age and compounding physical and psychological illnesses interact. It feels totally random. And so the moments of tension because of the randomness, it's just like an ever-present dark cloud hanging over everything. And it made even the most mundane moments for me feel like they were the calm before the really, really shitty storm. If that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, totally. I mean, I think there is that anxiety that definitely hangs over everything that we're mostly in George's point of view. We're experiencing the film through his eyes for most of it. So I think that makes sense. Something that actually Tucker had mentioned reminded me, sort of getting back to my soliloquy that Discord apparently wanted to shut down by freezing me about like George's like mental state and how he feels he owes and because of their love. The finger pointing, the blame, who is to blame for this? I mean, that comes very early on in the film when Anne has this stroke and she is like, I don't like doctors, I'm scared of doctors, I'm scared of hospitals, don't take me to the hospital. And George does, because presumably that is what everyone would do in that scenario. Your partner has a stroke, you go seek medical attention. And they do. I presume there's some time passed in between there where they're doing appointments, scheduling surgery, and because of the decision that presumably George makes, since Anne is not necessarily well, she ends up being paralyzed. Like he is presumably the one that's like, you need to get this surgery, we need to get this taken care of, and then he says she became one of the 5% where it goes horribly wrong. Mm-hmm. And presumably that is also, I mean, pretty clearly that is why he feels so committed to continuing to help her, to keeping her around, to like, I can help you, I can make up for this, I put you in this situation, I blame myself for where you are and what you are becoming. And so I'm going to help you. I'm going to stick by you, by your side. I'm not going to leave the apartment. I'm going to order out for groceries. I'm going to do it all. Because I feel at fault for this.
Yeah. Yeah, that's I mean, in these I think that's like it's a very good reading of what happens, and yet I also think that because it's a medical situation and it's, it just happens. And
I'm not saying that he is at fault, is to blame, but like he certainly feels that way.
He cares.
And I think that blame and that anxiety that we were talking about too is like basically ever present in, is it Jean-Louis Trintignant, I believe is the actor.
Yeah.
Basically ever present in his performance. And that moment when she's having the stroke and he's like trying to look into her eyes, but she is off. She is like, she's got
that scene, excellent scene, because that's the only time I feel like we actually see the horrible thing happening.
Yeah.
And
I mean, the second stroke we don't see.
We don't see the second stroke. We don't really ever see Anne falling down. We don't see all these, of course, don't see surgery or any of the aftermath. I mean, she comes home and it's all happened and now we're dealing with it. But we see the first stroke. And it's very strange because you're right. She just
stroke of genius.
She just goes completely blank. And that conversation immediately afterward too, in which she comes back and it's great. Mm-hmm. It's great sound design storytelling where he leaves the faucet running,
the top,
and he goes off
and it builds the tension and you're like,
you're like, oh, that faucet's running. And then me also thinking like, oh, he's losing his memory. He forgot to turn it off.
Yeah.
And then she turns it off, and then they have to they have this conversation in which, George has to tell her, you were out there, you were not doing well. Something is very, very, very wrong. And I think that is
and to what you said, Timo, like she's not maybe she's embarrassed or she doesn't believe that this happened. She's like, well, no, I mean, I remember I turned the faucet off because you left it on.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, do you remember me turning it on? Do you remember how the rag got here?
Do you remember how your collar got wet? And she's and she can't answer it. And it's the film, I think, very skillfully gets us to the point of both characters arrive on a decision without either of them saying it, and we know what it is. And they're like, we have to do something. We have to go to the hospital for this, and that's very much our inciting incident of this film.
I don't mean to keep talking here, but if someone else has something to weigh in on, but I also want to talk about who I feel is the true like goat of the movie, Emmanuel Riva as Anne. Mm-hmm. So I mean, we can talk about that. We can go to a different avenue, but
let's talk about her performance, because you are very right. She's true goat of this movie.
Yes,
I highly doubt she actually was paralyzed, but she looks very paralyzed in this film.
It's incredible physical performance.
Yeah, really
like
good.
Astounding. There's I mean, it wasn't a moment that is because like I got taken out of it. It just like popped into my brain and it was like, oh, I'm not watching like a woman who's had a stroke who is half paralyzed. I'm watching a actress do that
Yeah.
so convincingly.
And I think for me, it's like
yeah.
it's the thought process of that she has to force herself to stay in this mode for as long as she does that makes the performance all the more impressive, and only continues to get more impressive as the film goes on. She has her arm in a specific position, her legs flop back and forth in a way that is probably very difficult to do convincingly, and especially at the point when her face is more paralyzed after the second stroke. That is, I think, the most impressive element of acting in this film, because the way that she, like, her lips don't quite move in the right way. I'm like, I don't even know how you fake that.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think we're probably talking about the same moment of realization where I talked about like the stiffness in her face. I'm like, I'm not even sure how you can do that. Like, it's incredibly, it's clearly like incredibly trained from Emmanuel Riva, and
it's also not like it's like
impressive.
makeup that's doing it.
Yeah,
it's her muscles, it's her face.
Yeah, and who knows how much makeup was help. I mean, makeup can help in that kind of realms. It can't do it all, of course.
Yeah.
To me, I was thinking, I was like, this feels so researched. This feels so This feels so well known. Like, this is we are not doing Rain Man here. We are like, we know what's going on. I kind of wanted to make that comparison because it's like, it felt so, this depiction of what it's like living after a stroke, it needs to be accurate. It needs to be empathetic, and it needs to be tender performance-wise. And so that Emmanuel Riva succeeds on all fronts on that. And I mean, probably the film doesn't work as well if it's not, if her performance is anywhere short of stellar. It is the thing that makes us believe what we're seeing is really happening. And so, yeah, she's probably the go to this film.
I mean, I just had notes about, like, again, like that she's doing like this extremely physically trained, physically demanding stiffness to her performance, but yet the emotional work is all still there. Like, both are incredibly important and both elevate each other. She has the stiffness in her face, and yet she still manages to convey this like past embarrassment. I don't even know what like the step up from that would be, but like she's beyond embarrassed and debased that she needs help getting to the bathroom or getting dressed or all of this stuff. That's always on her face, especially in the moments where George is helping her do that stuff. And there's obviously the deep sorrow in that, and like the sense of that she is losing herself. That is always there in her performance, much like the anxiety and blame is there in George's, in Tristan Ya's performance. It is these weights on these people that are already so like physically decrepit because of their age. Then there's these great emotional weights on them as well, and it lends itself to the heavy emotional nature of this film and how it feels like. I think I had mentioned at the beginning, like we're in the emotional trenches with these characters. Like, we are being worn down over the course of 2 hours, and when George smothers Anne, it can be frightening or it can be a relief. Like it's all these different things because it's such an emotionally wrought film, headed by these emotionally intelligent and practiced performances.
Yeah. You don't get to be that good of a performer by only doing it for like a year or two. This is some experience on display here. Yeah, I mean the scene that I'm thinking of for Emmanuel Riva is well after she's lost her ability to speak very well and is still trying to. There's this number of scenes where she just struggles and just struggles and struggles to just say a sentence or a phrase, and
a nonsense sentence. These are they're not communicating anything.
Yeah, she's like singing with George.
She wants to.
Yeah, they're trying to sing together, which is another, like, the music, it just fits really, really perfectly for their characters, and then the ways that they can use that to connect and to help each other out. But when you could see in her eyes, you could see this like drive. She's trying so hard in this moment, and it's just not possible. And that's so disappointing and frustrating. And you really get a wealth of emotions, a big, wide spectrum in that moment. That is, you don't even really get the the circumstances in most films or stories to have those so many emotions being put on display. But here we do, and it works very well.
Yeah. Right, sorry, did you have anything else to add? I feel like we're jumping in here.
No, I just don't have anything to say about this movie. I think that there's an impassable roadblock for me with this movie. This is not a topic I want to watch a movie about.
Okay.
And that's just, it's not me saying you shouldn't be able to make a movie about this.
No, Abram wants to deeply censor the films on this subject matter.
I just think that at a certain point, I don't see any performances in this movie, which is a very high compliment in some regards. But I just think that, like, it's impossible for me to be like, oh man, it's so incredible the nuance of her performance. Not me mocking you guys, but like,
it sounds like you're mocking.
I can't do that because this topic is there's too much like real world emotional pain associated with it. It's a movie that I greatly appreciate, but I think the most honest way for me to explain my feelings on Amour is I don't like it.
Like,
okay.
Because it's too good at what it's doing, which I guess is a challenging place to be in, where our whole goal is to like nerd out about how movies are made and rank them against each other. I think that this film sort of exists outside of that for me in some ways.
Okay.
Yeah. What do you guys have to say about other filmmaking elements? Cinematography. We touched a little bit on some of these, the styles of shots and the editing of this film to really keep a single frame for a long time. See, 60, 70% of a conversation in a scene take place from one angle and you don't cut away from it. What do you guys make of those very conscious stylized choices? Even though they're not like, Wes Anderson stylized, it's not normal to shoot a dialogue scene like that.
I think that those are really the only stylistic choice I noticed, other than the handful of surrealist moments, which are very, very fleeting throughout the film. But I think my overwhelming takeaway from the framing, pacing, editing, cinematography was that it's very dialogue focused. I mean, there's no element of this film that is not trying to hone you in on.
So is the sound design / mix.
Yeah. Well, exactly, because there's not the music, as we were talking about. There's not the non-diegetic music. It's all focused on getting the performances and conversations between these characters, interactions between these characters, as directly to you as possible, without any cutting away, without any there's hardly even like reverse shot conversations. It's mostly two shots of people in one frame interacting with each other. And so I found the film to be very focused in that way, and I think that relatively stagnant camera work does contribute a little bit to what I was mentioning earlier. Of the film operates at a consistent hum throughout the film, which can lead to it feeling like it's a little bit repetitive. And I think that something that Abram was mentioning earlier, that the film does, I think, feel like it goes on a little bit long, because the scenes, while they are literally different, they are not necessarily emotionally different, and they are not necessarily interaction wise particularly different, because it is about the going about daily life. And so I do feel like the film can be a little bit static, and I think that's very apparent through the cinematography, which is focused and simple and straight to the point. But I like crazy shit in my cinematography, and I don't know. I get I didn't enjoy the cinematography because it was just what is on
I feel
screen.
like
it's
the goal of
cinematography is what's on the screen. That's so true. That's so true.
Oh, it's like what's mise
put that on the poster on the bottom.
What is
the cinematography is what's on the screen.
What's mise en scène again? It's just everything you see. Oh,
that's just what's on this.
Whatever you see.
What's on the screen.
Isn't it the whole movie though?
That's what mise en scène actually translates to. Is it's what you see. Yeah.
The way that I would sum up the technical choices of this film is just like, let's just have nothing in between.
Exactly.
Nothing in between the viewer and the emotion. We don't want anything. We just want to be a straight shot from I guess message, meaning, emotion to the audience. Yeah, beam directly to your mind.
Mm-hmm. The powers.
This is what the point of that Tesla thing is. What they put in your brain.
Yes, it's it. Michael Haneke, I'm sure, would be a huge fan of Neuralink. I'm sure. I mean, it's done in these two shots, but then one last thing that I want to mention, a sequence that is also emblematic of the editing and cinematography techniques at play here, which is when it's so jarring when Haneke breaks it up, which is why I think it's important that he does this very static two-shot, staying on one shot for an extended period of time. When he breaks that up, it is extremely shocking. And meant to emphasize an extremely shocking thing that is happening in that moment, such as the smothering, as we've already mentioned, or when Anne is refusing to eat or drink anything, and George slaps her.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Sure.
that's like a smash cut to a close up of her face, and we hang on it for a moment. Another incredible moment for Riva to show a recognition, like she's been so withdrawn, mentally for so long. And then being snapped into reality by her partner striking her, and being like,
Well,
and then we cut back to George, and he's like, oh, like I brought she like that was her for a moment, and I used that moment to hit her.
Yeah, he feels horrible in that
It's
moment.
an extremely dark moment that Haneke knows how to display effectively for the audience.
The love. He does it because he wants her to eat, because he loves her, but you hit somebody that you love. Yeah, it's really complicated and tough.
Guess he doesn't love her.
I guess
That's really my takeaway from this movie. False title, false advertising.
No Amour.
No, Amour.
I don't think that's
Amour, no.
French.
No, it's just no in French. It's just no, right?
Yeah, but
N-O-N, no.
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 Never mind.
All right.
We're not
Is there anything else from anybody?
The only other thing I wanted to share is I just think of the pigeon sequence. Maybe,
Oh, sure. We talk about the pigeon.
Is particularly sad, I feel, because then the insinuation being that the letters he's writing are to An, who he's already killed.
Yes.
I think it sort of illustrates in some ways that and I think it was you, Timo, mentioning it, the futility of his life without her. And that's why I don't really... The ending is obviously ambiguously in a literal sense, but I think that on a more like metaphorical sense or like a spiritual sense, I think it's pretty unambiguous that his life is over. Regardless of if he's dead or he walked at that door to walk into the ocean or to disappear into the countryside, whatever, his life is over. And I found the whole pigeon scene frightening, especially as he can't even properly get back up after he's caught the pigeon.
Oh yeah, and after this whole movie in which you've seen them struggle to walk around, and then that scene there just like really is the nail in the coffin for the almost body horror of this film.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's to me it's like she has left the apartment, and so he follows. He walks out. He leaves the apartment, and the apartment is kind of their life together. It's their being and everything.
Yeah. I mean, I just for closing thoughts, yeah, man, I found it an extremely emotionally demanding film. But again, circling back to my original thoughts, is like it's not manipulative. It is like Haneke has a certain way of just giving you harrowing shit just as a fastball, just straight down the middle, no curveball, no nothing on it, and still making it
no
super
spit.
No spit, no nothing. Just making it a supremely affecting for an audience without making you feel like, well, this was a little bit, this could have been a little bit more subtle or anything. It's extremely subtle, but yet as close to real life as you can get. But, it has these supplemental surrealistic elements to it, and the performances are incredible, and it's, demanding you to think about these questions of, love and these challenging moments in the closing in the closing of people's lives, and the indignity of death. That's something I had written down, but like at this moment where George is like, well, there was this awkward moment at this funeral, and Anne's response is like, I know what you're doing. You're not gonna make me like want to die less by like talking about the indignity that can happen after you die. Like I still want this. And, your partner wanting to die, and how do you respond to that? It's all extremely tough subject material that Haneke and Riva and Trentignan can like display with so much effort that it feels effortless.
I am gonna preface my score saying I'm not gonna give it a great score though, because like Abram says, this movie is so unrewarding. It's like it's just a downer, and it just doesn't really like it doesn't hit in the way that like a film. I don't know. I'm still on this like Daniel Blake is the kind of film that I'm comparing it to, but that is ultimately trying for something different, and I feel like we've uncovered what this film is trying to go for, but just the sheer like I'm never gonna seek to watch this kind of movie. I'm never gonna look for this. I don't want to watch this movie again. Like I think that is impacting my score, even though very well made, very well acted. It's almost too tough. It's too much maybe.
Sure.
I mean, I would not score it if I could, but I have to.
There's someone off screen or someone off camera pointing a gun at Abrams' head and at my head. I'm not sure why. You know, I am planning on scoring.
The Logitech webcam is like filtering out, but there's actually like a red.
There's a
dot.
red.
That's true. Yeah, we do
In
have
real life, if you were here.
Well, yeah, if you were, Timo does some editing wizardry to take that out of every
You
episode.
don't even know how long
all
that
of us
takes
actually.
And the breathing of the sniper, man, it's so hard to get out of the microphone.
Very odd that he's using a full sniper rifle at probably 4 feet of distance. I don't know. It's very odd.
Well, for the sake of Abrams' head, we should give this a score.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay.
I'm punching mine in.
Mine went away. What
Uh-oh.
happened? Hold
Uh-oh.
on.
Uh-oh.
Hold on.
It went away on accident. Oh.
You got it.
Oh, I did it right. I thought I put it in the wrong column.
I think you got it. There you go.
Okay.
Good.
We have...
Oh, beep, beep, beep. Sorry.
There we go. We've got a score. We are going to have to deal with a tie here. It is 8.1. The point breakdown is I gave it a 6.9, so that's my not very good score, but 6.9 is pretty high up there. Followed by Abrams' 8. Then Tucker gave it an 8.5, and Tanner at the top with a 9.0. So 8.1, Barton Fink. Barton Fink's at spot number 6 is our tie.
You just had to do this, didn't you? I knew that it was going to be competing with these two films when I put it on my own ranking, so you guys just had to make me hash this out.
Well, there's something very interesting about our scores that we gave Barton Fink and Amour, which are the ones that are tied, is that Abrams is the only one who has it lower. Barton Fink lower than Amour, but his score is just so much lower than the rest of ours that it balances out.
I'd also put. I don't like Barton Fink. I think it's annoying and ill-conceived.
Well, which one? Which way, Western man?
Ill-written.
Annoying and ill-written, or
Nothing.
really, really heavy subject material?
I put Barton Fink over this.
Okay,
So do I.
go.
I'm going to go with Abram Barton Fink over this.
Well, I guess my vote doesn't matter.
Would you have gone Amour over? Just to litigate your own personal hang-up here.
I haven't. I like the Coens more. I haven't seen a lot of Haneke's work, so I guess I'd go.
Now, Tanner.
I guess I'd go Barton. Yep.
I've got an interesting factoid that I was just learning as we were talking about Michael Haneke's
Coens were
filmography.
going to direct this movie.
Nope. Nope. Is that
Interesting.
in every film of his, but like 2 or 3, the characters are named Anna and George.
Really?
Yes.
That's interesting.
Wow.
I have to
Totally
watch
separated, unrelated movies. And actually, in quite a few, they're Anne and Georges Trintignant.
Whoa.
Totally unrelated
Or
movies.
Score for unoriginality.
True.
It's really weird. Go look at
Or
it.
something?
I don't know. And also Ava. Ava is in there quite a bit as well. I'm not making this up.
Eva also.
Oh yeah, it is. It's like
Eva.
It's like EVA.
God forbid a fella have 3 favorite names and he just uses them over and over again.
Michael Haneke parent. I just have to look at this.
Well, now we have decided Amour is going to go at spot number 7 on the list, below Barton Fink and above The Ballad of Narayama, another film about aging and dying, actually, if we recall way back months ago.
I've noticed that, I think we'll continue to notice that the con jury, as different as they are every year, and we'll talk about who was on the jury this year, don't you worry, they seem to have a recurring favorite couple of themes, you know, whether those be like class or relationships or potentially aging. There's just a good cycle that you can draw a line between.
Why can't they like fucking like gems and action and things?
Gems and action. Okay.
Gems?
Well, we can. They're choosing this year's winner right now. Well, not right now, but
right now.
Soon.
Tanner.
So we can tell them to choose gems and action this time around.
Yeah, I'm sending a telegram to France.
Gems me.
I don't know gems. Maybe.
Like Infinity War is what you're talking about?
Or like just like treasure.
Oh, I see.
Those are Infinity Stones.
Plunder, booty.
In the comics, they're gems. Anyway, that's besides the point. We can have the jury go Furiosa this time around.
Yeah.
It's not in competition, but they'll just choose it anyway.
Premiered to very, very good reviews at Con.
It is at Con, not in competition, but
it's the Dial of Destiny this year.
Yeah, it is.
No.
Maybe.
It's got about twice the Rotten Tomatoes score from the Dial of Destiny premiered at Con.
Tanner, hit us with those Palme details.
Oh, well, I'd be happy to. Before that, though, I want to hit you with some Academy details, because, as we mentioned, this film was nominated for Best Picture. It was also at the Academy Awards that year. It won Best Foreign Film, also nominated for Actress in a Leading Role for Emmanuelle Riva. Glad to see that she got a nomination there.
The GOAT.
Michael Haneke was also nominated for Best Director and Best Original Screenplay for this film. But
she probably lost to I don't know, like the Queen or whatever, like
2012.
like Iron Lady.
No, I bet 2012 was that did Lincoln? That was Lincoln. I know that Emmanuelle Riva lost to Jennifer Lawrence in Silver Linings Playbook.
Oh, Silver Linings. That's unfortunate.
Yeah. Anyway, 2012. Amour won the Palme d'Or at the Cannes Film Festival.
Oh boy,
directed
howdy!
By Michael Haneke. 3 years after he won the Palme d'Or before, we'll be talking about him again in his film The White Ribbon from 2009. The jury president this year was Nani Moretti. Also on the jury this year was Hayam Abbas from Palestine, Andrea Arnold, who has a film in competition at the Cannes Film Festival this year, Diane Kruger, a German actress, Ewan McGregor. Everyone
Pog face on 3.
Everyone Pog for Obi-Wan Kenobi, and Alexander Payne.
Oh,
was on the jury this year.
Hey, how'd that guy?
Other films in competition that Amour beat out include David Cronenberg's Cosmopolis, Leos Carax's Holy Motors, Thomas Vinterberg's The Hunt, Killing Them Softly by Andrew Dominic, Wes Anderson's Moonrise Kingdom, and Jeff Nichols' Mud.
Wow, okay.
I like Killing Them Softly more than Amour.
Well, I knew you would. I was waiting on that. I was waiting on that comment after I said Killing Them Softly.
Well, there you have it.
And Moonrise Kingdom.
Yeah, Moonrise Kingdom is pretty good too. Mud is not bad either.
Haven't seen that one.
Well,
wait, should we spin the
there's something to do now.
It feels wrong that we should be spinning the wheel for some reason. I'm not sure why.
I don't know, but it is wrong, isn't it?
I'm just not feeling it this week.
Let's not do it this time.
Yeah.
Screw you, gods.
Well, we're gonna be hearing from them later. We're gonna be definitely hearing from them.
I'm defying the gods.
There's a 3+ hour film on here, and we're probably gonna get it next time for shirking this responsibility.
Well,
what are we doing?
How are we gonna defy the gods? Well, I happen to know that a fella sitting to my side here is going on a trip. He's hiding away there, right?
Oh, he's giving a little kiss.
Yeah.
Tucker is traveling to the land of the Romans, to Italia. And so we're going to watch...
Mamma mia.
That's where the italics come from.
Yes, they do come from that boot-shaped country. And so we have decided to screw the wheel and just watch a movie that we want to watch, which is going to be Rome Open City. A little pre-tourism for Tucker? Or when are you planning on watching this? Are you going to watch this in the place as the Romans did?
I could.
You could.
Time so the movie ends when you land.
Whoa,
dude. Whoa.
Well, Tucker, I
need to watch it on my
news.
phone, like I'm watching like Family Guy clips. I step out of the airport into Rome, like.
You'd be like, wow, this looks way different because it's not war torn.
Because it's not 1945.
Yeah, it's not Rome 1945
Wait,
under
Rome is in
just
color?
after fascist occupation.
So
Yeah,
you
that's good. Where's all the black and white? What's this all at?
What is this movie? I don't know what this movie is.
This is a Roberto Rossellini film from 1945. It chronicled. I'll just give you the plot.
Como
description.
Arigato, Mr. Roberto.
That's right. Good job, Tucker.
yes.
This film is about.
We deserve a little fun after talking about Amour for like an hour and 20
Yeah, we
minutes.
deserve a little fun.
Yeah, that's fair.
And that's why we're going to do Rome
During-
Open City.
Well, this one's nice and light. Don't you worry. During Nazi occupation of Rome in 1944, the leader of the resistance is chased by the Nazis as he seeks refuge and a way to escape.
Okay.
Have you seen this film? It's a very good film. Love this one.
Is it long?
No, it's like 2 hours, I think. Actually, let me check. I got the runtime. It's an hour 40 minutes. This one is an hour and 40 minutes. Confirmed. 103.
I really was thinking last time, I'm like, fuck, this really seems like
A long hour, 40 minutes. No, it's yeah. But yes, Roberto Rossellini's Rome Open City, available to stream on the Criterion channel.
Yeah. A lot of Palme d'Or winners are.
Yeah. Fellini
Sure.
gets a writing
Not Amour.
credit in this one, too. So we'll be on the lookout for that.
Oh.
Yes. This is like, this is your Cinema Studies 101 Italian neo-realism
Yes. Yeah.
movie. So,
You thought
Well,
this
and
movie was realistic? Buckle your seatbelt.
what'd you say, Tucker?
Bicycle. That's the
That's the
Oh,
one.
yeah,
that's
that
the
one.
yeah.
That's the year after this.
And it
though, I
did.
think? That's
That one
1945?
also won the Palme d'Or, didn't it?
It did not.
Oh, it didn't? Damn.
No.
Such a good
It won best foreign film at the Academy
Yes.
It wins the Palme d'Or in my heart. It's a good
Wait,
movie.
It's a movie that,
That
makes
was
me
the
cry like nothing else.
Well,
Correct.
we'll keep walking home in peace.
Yeah.
Nice work, everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you guys for discussing Amour, figuring out this film. Next week, join us as we risk it all to talk about Rome Open City. Will we be punished for it or not? Remains to be seen. Well, stay tuned
Evo,
here.
I'm going to Pompeii. What if?
Well, bye.
Oh no! I was gonna get hit with Pompeii too.
What if?
Vestuvius, man. Vestuvius.
Uh-huh. Oh, very good. I like this dubious. All right, do the outro, Timo.
Stay tuned to Backlot Banter for Rome Open City next week. You know what I always say, stay cool, keep warm. Peace.